Sometimes when you work with percents, the percent or the part is given to you and you're supposed to find the whole. So if we look at one like this first one, 40% of a number is 180. What they're telling us is that there's this whole number. We don't know the whole thing. We know 100% of the number. We don't know it. But they're telling us that 40% of that number is 180. So I can use this piece to find that piece. If I know that 40% of a number is 180, then I can find a single percent by dividing that by 40. And if I divide 180 by 40, is 4.5. So if I need 100%, I'm trying to find the whole thing, I just multiply that by 100. 1% is 4.5, but I need 100 of those for 100%. It's 450. So the full amount, the whole thing must be 450. If I look over at this one, they're telling me that 75% of a number, well, let me put this out here. They're telling me 75% of the number is 230. Well, I don't know what the whole number is. It looks like they want me to find it. I've got a part of it, which is good. If I take 75% of the number, I know that that's 230. If I can find a single percent of the number, if I divide 230 by 75, I get not a real clean number. It's like 3 and 1/15. But then I'm going to need 100 of those. So if I just type that in my calculator, if I take that 3 and 1/15 and multiply it by 20, it gives me 306 and 2/3. Now, that's not a great answer, but it is the answer that works here. It's 306 and 2/3. If we look at this last one, why don't you pause it, try it, see what you come up with as an answer. Okay, so I know that 15% of this number is 180, and they want me to find the entire thing. I don't know it, but I have enough information here that I can solve it. If I know that 15% of a number is 180, then I can find 1% of the number by dividing both of them by 15. That becomes 12. And I need 100%, so I need 100 of those. 1,200 ends up being our answer. You can also do word problems, same thing. Jenny made 320 walnut biscuits, which is 40% of the total number of biscuits. So I know if I use a bar model, 40% of the biscuits are walnut, and they tell me it's 520. They want me to know all of them, which is 100%. Well, I don't know that, but I know that 40% is 520. So 1%, if I divide both sides by 40, gives me is 13. So 100% of the biscuits would be 13 times 100. There's 1,300 total biscuits. If I now look at this one, 28% of the eggs in a basket are quail eggs, and the rest are chicken eggs. So what they're telling me is that if I use a bar model here, 28% are quail, and the rest are chicken. These are chicken. But they're saying 140 of them are the quail, and they want to know how many total eggs. Well, I don't know how many total ones there are. I know that 140 of them make up 28%. So if I know that 140 of them are 28% of all of them, if I can find 1%, then I can find 100%. If I can divide by 28 here and divide by 28 here, it tells me every 1% is 5 eggs, so 100% must be 500 total eggs. That's the whole thing. Why don't we try, you pause and try this last one. Keith has 34% of the stamps in his album. If there are 204 stamps in the album, so how many total does he have? See if you can figure out what the total amount of stamps are. Okay, so we've got that Keith has 34% of his stamps, they're in the album. And 204 of them are in the album. So 34% is 204. They want to know what's the total amount of stamps. Well, if I know that 204 stamps make up 34%, if I can find out a single percent, I'll be able to figure out 100%. So I know to go from 34% to 1% is divide by 34. And if I do the same thing here, we get 6. So 100% must be 600. There's 600 total stamps in all.